Animaniacs Issue 4. Some people ask a scientist if Acme Labs has been receiving alien telecommunications. He says that it's true, and already his planet is a winner in the clearinghouse sweepstakes. And some new mice will be delivering his entry tomorrow. Brain feels insulted because he wasn't picked when he's older, and this time all he has to do is kick open the door. Since he never does that, it's not like he usually has super strength, or he'd be taking advantage of it all the time. So it's more likely that he did something to weaken the door first. Pinky's nice to him, complimenting his word, and Brain wants to give those mice a piece of his mind. Then someone says those reporters bought that cosmic clearing house story, and he says that once they make this deal, they'll see serious cosmic house clearing. The only way there'd be sentient people on Venus is if they're supernatural enough to survive it, and lived underground, so that's why we haven't seen them. It'd make more sense if it was a planet outside of our galaxy. Dr. Comet says this Venetian mega mind blinder sounds like it could do great brainwashing, and he can't figure out why they're making him send mice to pick up the parts. Me neither. Because it only makes sense if they knew about Brain, and the aliens would have requested him then. At least this time, Brain doesn't punish Pinky for not thinking what he was thinking, but I shouldn't have to compliment that. He says he'll need translation to communicate with normal mice. Why does he think Pinky could translate? Pinky's only speaking in English too. Back at Brain's cage, we see the normal mice going after Cheese, and Brain keeps Pinky from going after it too by stepping on his tail, and walks away from the cage with them in it. He says they need to watch their cholesterol, and predictably wants to go to Venus. Brain tells Pinky to shut up because they need to keep a low profile as their cage is being carried by someone. But obviously this cage is soundproof if he and the scientists can't hear them. Not to mention the fact that these so-called mice are reading already makes it obvious that they're the two genius mice. So these guys must know that they replaced the regular mice. And they just don't mind because why would they? Brain's too incompetent anyways. And why do they think having just helmets on the mice would be enough to protect them from Venus? And yet it tries to be realistic by having their rocket take a few hours. But it wouldn't just be a few hours either. Brain uses a special Acme glass breaker, floats towards a control panel, and Pinky hopes Brain really is steering the rocket towards Venus. Brain says he's taking a shortcut. Why are the magic gravity boots trapped in a vending machine that regular mice can't operate anyways? Brain planned on Pinky having the money for them, and they walk on Venus, but they're perfectly fine somehow. The only way this would make any kind of sense is if their helmets had a witch's spell on them to protect the whole body. It's obvious the story doesn't care about making sense, so it's a good thing it's so engaging. Brain ends up seeing a flag advertising a sale on what he's looking for sticking out of a crater, tied to a periscope. We see that the Venetians don't really look like you'd expect, but at least that's creative. Brain greets them saying that he comes in peace, and Pinky falls saying that he almost came in pieces. I like that play on words, but I'm officially sick of the rushed or lazy coloring. Why are so many of the panels not bothering to properly color in the main characters? That should be top priority. Pinky calls the Venetians felines, but it's a miracle he thought that because they just looked like vague animal people to me. They don't need to have anything in common with cats to be mean to Brain and Pinky on sight. The explanation that they're just racist against a species they're unfamiliar with would be more believable. They hit the mice with a spoon one after the other, and Brain removes his space boots and tells Pinky to do the same. So they float away from them, and return to the rocket. Brain complains that the Mega Mind Blinder was just a ploy, and then he breaks off a part of the control panel by accident, and says it's the fault of shoddy construction. A part of a spaceship's control panel wouldn't be built that badly. It's a miracle they made it back to Earth, complete with parachutes. Animaniacs Issue 8. Brain exhausts Pinky by forcing him to run on a spinning globe just for the sake of a demonstration he doesn't need to do. Brain holds a magnet attached to string tied to the top of the globe, and says that when he builds his new invention and throws it from the North Pole, the cable will become taught, and he somehow thinks gravity will cease and everyone will fly off the face of the earth. And somehow he thinks that it'll leave him and Pinky alone to seize control. Of what? A civilization without people? So far his plans in the Animaniacs comic have been delusional every time. And while Pinky doesn't talk like he's a genius, Brain seems more insane than him. This is out of character, because most of the time he'd never make a plan that involves Omnicide. And if he was the type to kill someone, he'd have already done it. And maybe he would have succeeded in a few of his plans. The Animaniacs 2020 show had him be darker than usual, but this is ridiculous. Like this is a whole other universe from that. It's also out of character of Pinky to be fine with this. He shows compassion a lot. Instead he calls his plan brilliant, even though they're bored with having the Earth to themselves in one episode. And all he does is ask what'll keep them from flying off the Earth. It could make sense that he doesn't care about this dangerous plan if it's because he assumes it'll fail. But usually he's not shy at all about telling him when he's morally opposed to something he's planning. Brain says they'll be duct taped to a tree, but if his plan involves gravity in general ceasing, why would only people fly off the Earth? Why wouldn't the ground itself be spun off from its rotational force? He knows this wouldn't work because he's a genius. This would only make sense if he went crazy and no longer cared about ruling the world and just wants to get everyone killed, including himself. But even then, how would that happen? This plan would only be believable of a robot brain of snowballs who'd replace him to frame him. And even then he wouldn't risk it actually working since it'd kill him too. Brain says that they need money to buy a billion-ton magnet. I assumed he was planning to make it, if he bothered to even talk about this plan. Why would he think he could ever buy a magnet like that? He says as he's using a sewing machine for once that he wants to win a $1 million purse from the biggest horse race of the year. Well, first off, it's not $1 billion, it's a $1 billion. So if it's just going to be another money-making scheme, he could have easily had taking over the world as his end goal as usual. So why didn't the writer leave out the part where he talked about his plan with the magnet then? He's never going to get that far. Brain and Pinky are written to quote lines from the show, and then have to assume there was a time skip to explain Brain suddenly wearing a different outfit. Pinky compliments him, and somehow changes his body to look different for fun. So in this other universe where Brain's pure evil, he's genetically engineered to be able to do this. It can't be the case in other stories, or else he would have taken advantage of his flexibility. Brain quotes the show again, telling him to stop goofing off or he'll have to hurt him. But this time it makes no sense because that's what he's doing already. Sadly, there's no explanation for how they got all the way to Kentucky in time. So I have to assume they used a super fast little plane Brain invented. Brain says near the stables that by analyzing, he'll find a horse that's guaranteed to win the race. He's too confident here. It's all down to luck. That's what Harvest Moon taught me. How did the horse say Narf? I assume the reason Brain didn't question this is that he just assumes that it was genetically engineered. Brain says that by combining the statistics and his low body weight, the horse he's picked can't lose, even though it clearly looks angry at him, so it can't be trusted. And Pinky and the horse somehow look in love. This is just to reference the show as well, unless it's a coincidence. And either way, it never made sense because the horse isn't sentient. Pinky apologizes for getting distracted, and Brain says he'll take the place of a real jockey. A jockey for the horse he picked gets a phone call from Brain who tells him he's just won $10 million. And the jockey believes him and says he's out of here, and runs out of the building, which wouldn't happen. He'd ask him where he won it from and be suspicious of the good news. Brain gets asked to replace him because there's no one else to do it and he's thanked for it. It doesn't seem in character for Brain to casually start singing. It's more like Pinky. Then he sees Pinky on the horse and complains that his extra weight wasn't accounted for in his calculations. I assume this makes sense because Pinky's too used to always being around him and forgot that the plan didn't involve him being with them this time. Eventually the race starts and Pinky ends up thrown off the horse. At least that was realistic. We don't see Pinky get stomped on for some reason. And as soon as I got told that Pinky's favorite horse trailed Far behind, I wondered if the horse would backfire on Brain. When Far looks at Pinky, Her inexplicable impossible crush somehow caused her to go much faster to eventually grab his tail and win the race. And Brain has some completely stilted response to that. At least the money went to someone deserving. Animaniacs, Issue 9. Brain states the obvious to Pinky that the ducks are laughing while they're in tuxedos for some reason. The ducks wouldn't act in a human way like this unless they're genetically engineered. And he says victory is in the air instead of thinking they're laughing at him. It's nice to see him appreciate something too easily, but he should have just been insulted. Then the story finally starts with Brain telling Pinky in his cage that he's been making a laughing serum using helium of all things. Pinky explains what he was laughing at the TV for, and says this guy told a joke in a big room to a bunch of other people. Brain plans on using his laughing serum on Washington, D.C.'s water supply to make the world at his mercy. He's at least smart enough to realize that the amount of serum needed would be too much for them to transport alone. And somehow he walks into a fancy restaurant housing nothing but talking mice with tables at their side. Suddenly there's that many genetically engineered mice. The confusing thing is that this restaurant exists for them on normal human Earth. Brain must have had it made. Also, he could have just flown a toy helicopter he made to be like a real helicopter and had the serum in it so he could just fly to the water supply himself without needing to get anyone's help. Why does Brain think the 3 mice in tuxedos are the unsavory type? Lots of people wear tuxedos. Why does Brain call them unsavory types to their faces if he's trying to get their help? The mice happily agree to help Brain because they're not doing anything else tonight. Then if it's that easy, he should do this a lot more often, provided that they don't have much dialogue. Sure, they're stupid and have too much faith in him to be a good ruler, but that's just what he wants from a minion. And that's the only thing unsavory about them. He was completely confident he could get their help, so it's not like he never thought they'd agree. When I called them stupid, I was right because they didn't know he wanted to take over the world, and one of them thought Destiny was a person. And another one is the stupidest of all by somehow thinking Destiny is Alabama's sister. The shortest one there is the unsavory type by not believing in tipping, but Brain didn't know that. Why does Brain think that having him and Pinky dressed the same as all those other mice eases anonymity? Brain's head shape wouldn't be anonymous unless this was his first plan in the area. He has a stupid line as well, telling the rodents, "Let's get to rodenting." It was nice of Pinky to say that's a very stylish look for him, so I shouldn't have told him he's trying to ignore him. The only way Pinky was being dumb was that this isn't Brain's style of fashion. He's not cool enough for the style of fashion because he's really serious and uses big words too much. Brain should know that it's a waste of time for them all to use code names to become more anonymous, if they're not all well known as it is, which is already a stretch since they're talking mice, then they're already anonymous. And how did Brain come up with their code names? This is needless effort. His code name for Pinky is really lazy, but at least that's less effort to waste time, so that's the smartest name of all. If his own codename is as lazy as Mr. Brain, he should know that there's no point bothering with it because anyone who'd know about him would see through it anyways. Brain tells the mice carrying his serum that their efforts will be rewarded when it comes to power. He should know better than to insult them calling their efforts meager though, because he's lucky they're helping him. Out of nowhere, a cop wearing inexplicably green outfit confronts them on this. He says it's midnight. Then his life sure sucks having to work at midnight. It's smart of the mice other than Brain to instantly think of a lie for what they're up to. One says they're bringing their granny medicine. Brain tells the cops the truth, and he says, well, I guess that's okay. This would make sense if he was doing this because he has no faith in them to succeed. But he doesn't know what that serum does. You'd think he'd take it seriously and just take it away. So maybe he does think they'll succeed, and is just so opposed to his own government that he's fine with letting them do this. I don't know why people think people don't believe Brain. If they didn't believe him, that'd mean they'd think he's crazy. So they'd call him out on being crazy. They'd make fun of him, not just humor him. The confusing thing is that he says, "You crazy mice are always up to something," and he walks away. The only reason he'd say mice are always up to something is if he had already heard about Brain. So he knows about some of his past adventures and finds them amusing. Why did he even act antagonistic to him then? That'd be because he was intimidated by their canister. What he would have done is ask what was in the canister because he wouldn't want it to be something lethal to people or make them sick. But again, if he doesn't actually care about the people of Capitol Hill, then it makes sense that he wouldn't care what's in it. Maybe he just wanted to know where they were going with the canister, and wondered if they were going somewhere else than the White House. And because they were, he stopped caring. There's clearly only one thing they were up to carrying a canister, and that was that they planned on using the canister for something sinister. He could have easily stopped them. This scene should have been in the story. Time passes, and finally it's lampshaded that Brain's being rude by calling these guys his minions when he should be nicer to them for helping him. One says, "I'll give him faster in the kisser if he calls us minions again." Brain would have heard that, so he shouldn't be stupid enough to call them minions again, after one of them plans on using a balloon that a kid left behind to make the canister lighter. Brain doesn't think their idea is so good, and one of the minions tells Brain to shut up, and tells his friends to tie the balloon to the bottle. It was instantly obvious that the bottle would get floated up if it was tied to the balloon, and none of the mice would be able to keep it moving forwards. The minions fly away holding the balloon and regret their decision as they thankfully leave the canister behind. I don't think a mere balloon would be able to lift 3 mice way that high up. In fact, honestly, I don't think a balloon would be able to lift even 1 mouse. We finally see the context behind that first image, because Brain's laughing serum makes the ducks laugh, and that proves it works. Pinky gets the impulse to pat him on the back to congratulate him. But in all of the plans he's done with him, he's never done that. So that's out of character. And a pat on the back being inexplicably too hard and backfiring is so overdone that I'm sick of the cliche. It's not like he's that strong. How could he slap him that far away accidentally? It'd make more sense if he did it on purpose and just pretended to regret it. But that wouldn't be in character either. He apologizes and asks if he's okay, and reality ensues because he starts laughing from the serum. Brain says he forgot to make them immune to the serum. He's almost as stupid as Eggman was with the metal virus. But I'd expect better from him. He was smart enough to decide to leave the land of Oz and try to take over somewhere else. In the Pinky and the Brain comic. That'd be like Eggman deciding to leave Earth. He says he's incapacitated, but that doesn't justify Pinky carrying him home. This story by John Walker is about Pinky and Brain making sure they get to go on a rocket to Venus to get brainwashing technology from the aliens that magically lived there. For no reason, some regular mice were going to be sent there, instead of the mouse that caused a lot of people problems trying to take over the Earth. The scientists must still value Pinky and Brain just because they're genetically engineered. Because if they wanted them dead, they'd have easily killed them by now. But the scientists didn't know he was sending these mice on a suicide mission. So he would have sent Pinky and Brain in the first place because they're so obviously smarter than them. Brain's plan fails because there was no brainwasher, and instead the Venetians just wanted to eat them, and lied to try to get mice in particular because they're apparently similar to cats. That was a creative twist, and makes sense, explaining why mice were wanted. So it was an engaging story, even if it was too lazy to explain why the helmets alone helped them survive Venus. So I have to assume a witch's spell is on them, but it's still interesting. So the biggest problem with it is the art. It's constantly distracting how amateurish the coloring is. Why are Pinky and Brain constantly not colored in right? A thing the comic does sometimes is going a couple of issues before another Pinky and the Brain story. The next one's in issue 8, so a lot of people must have been disappointed by the next few issues not having them, with no warning. It's not like you can even look on the cover and every time know that Pinky and the Brain are in it. This story by Peter Hastings ends up being about Brain trying to win a horse race for money. And he fails because of the complete nonsense that Pinky and another horse fell in love, and so it's sped up just for him. Money-making schemes of Brains are a dime a dozen. The most noteworthy thing about the story is Brain being mischaracterized as an omnicidal maniac all of a sudden instead of wanting to run the world. And Pinky was equally out of character by acting happy with that. And there was no explanation for this to justify it. Not even a text box at the start saying that this is a different universe, so that was jarring. How does he not realize it's pointless to assume control of a world with nobody on it when he doesn't know any other planets with sentient life to rule, since there's no continuity? If there was, he could want to rule Venus. But it's still out of character for him to plan on killing anyone, because Snowball stays alive. The art and dialogue at the start should have been different. I don't know how that got past the editing. And even if being duct taped to a tree didn't send him off the planet, how does he plan on escaping that tree to do what he wants without flying off to his death as soon as he does? But at least that was an expendable part of the story because he never got anywhere near achieving that goal. This story is about Brain trying to take over the world by trying to put laughing serum in Washington DC's water supply. For some reason he hires minions from a talking mice restaurant on Earth to do it, when it could have been much more likely to succeed if he just flew in a tiny helicopter with a serum in it, so he could get it to its destination just fine. Instead he does something that takes a lot longer. The minions end up flying away from a balloon when they try to make their job get done faster, and Piggy uncharacteristically hits him on the back and knocks him into the pond full of laughing serum. And that foils their plan. As usual, it's all problems that could have easily not happened.